These are the Moondrop Variations. Let's hope you can see it clearly enough on the camera. If not, just look at the thumbnail or Google some images right now to get a better view. Thank you to the person who lent me these along with the Xduoo SA6. If you didn't lend me these two earphones, these videos would not be possible. I can't afford these things on my own, and all these vendors are not going to lend me $500 earphones at a time. They only give me free samples of like $100 items, maybe 150 or 200 at most. So thank you so much, really. The Variations, in a nutshell, if you don't want to listen to the rest of the video with my commentary and in-depth detail, I'll tell you right now in 10 seconds, my whole take. They have a great mid-centered focus. All the instruments play very nicely, very engaging, but the low-end presence, the bass and low mids somewhere in that area, is fuzzy enough with not enough separation and clarity in that low end for me to enjoy it in that area. And now here's the detail. You know how there are some tracks in your favorite song, by your favorite artists, or in your where there's a moment of negative space, where it suddenly cuts to silence in the middle of the track before something bangs right after, like a drum hit or something else hits. You know, there's this beautiful, or maybe you only have the pitter patter when it goes to like a lull in the music after being exciting, and there's only like a pitter patter of a couple instruments or one instrument even before it ramps up again. Those beautiful moments of quiet are things that I really look for in earphones. Those are the moments that strike me the hardest sometimes. And the Variations don't let me enjoy those negative spaces as much as I'm used to enjoying it on other things. Hopefully that's telling. Let's take a perfect example. If you look up the band A Perfect Circle and look up the track Noose in their album 13th Step, go to 1 minute and 50. I know this so well because I just listened to it recently and I caught this moment with the Variations in my ears. And I had to like pick up other things and compare them too, because I was like, wait a second, that moment usually hits me harder. Go to 1 minute, 51 seconds on Noose by A Perfect Circle. And it goes from this intentionally fuzzy, for a whole almost 2 minutes, the artist made the song sound like it was recorded improperly and fuzzy. And then it cuts to silence at 1:50 or 1:51. And then right then and there, it breaks the silence with like a drum hit, I think it was, or some instrument. I think it was a drum hit. And everything comes into full clarity. But that initial drum hit gives such a kind of like an eye-opening, revealing feeling to this new section of the song that's going to be mastered properly and cleanly, that it like wakes up your senses. It makes you love what you're listening to suddenly. And that contrast from that fuzzy part of the song to that clear part of the song is just made so much more exciting by that clean drum hit. But that drum hit does not hit as sharp and as clean and as resounding on the Variations, because it has this low-end presence that's just a tad bit fuzzier than other sets that I've heard. And almost anything else sounds better on those negative spaces, because even though it tries to give a satisfying, immersive, low-end presence in its bass, and it does feel, for the most part, very satisfying, the Variations, in that low end, there are those precious moments and other moments that you start to hear more and more where you want it to just be a little cleaner, a little more open sounding, and that fuzzy low end is just ever present in a way that can kind of get at you, or it got at me. I loved how engaging the mids were. That's the thing. I loved how it presented most of the instruments, most of the time. And the treble wasn't overplayed. It was never sibilant to me. So it was really easy to listen to. The Variations could be somebody's gold standard set for an engaging instrumentation for most things, and never feeling fatigue from too much treble. And it never feels fatiguing from the low end either. There's never any fatigue. Even though it's very listenable, it's not something that I want to grab. After comparing it to something like the 7 Hz Timeless or the Ikko OH10 Obsidian, I really did miss those quiet moments. I missed those negative spaces. Even the 7 Hz Timeless, which also tries to hit that low end in this kind of warmer, fuzzier way. The thing about the Timeless that redeems itself where the Variations does not is that, for me anyway, for me and my tastes in my library, always, the Timeless for me had more perceived detail and separation in the music in general. And I think a lot of people attribute that to, they say, that, I don't know, I'm not an audio engineer, but people say it's because the planar magnetic driver is moving faster and it's able to produce more detail more readily than other driver technologies. So the 7 Hz Timeless is a bit of a unicorn. It has a lot of a low-end presence, and yet it doesn't bloom over and fuzz over the spaces because it has enough speed in the drivers to produce all the other sounds with great fidelity. So you're hearing that warmth true that you would also hear on the Variations, but you also hear more detail than you hear in the Variations. To me, the Timeless is a straight upgrade to the Variations in those respects, because it has a similar low end that's big and hefty, but it has more detail, perceived detail. The only caveat with the Timeless, before you go press buy on the Timeless, thinking, well, if it's half the price of the Variations, then I should just buy the Timeless. But the caveat with the Timeless is that the treble range in the Timeless can feel a little bit sibilant on some tracks. So it's kind of like, darn it, it sounds like I should just get the Timeless, but now he's saying that it could hurt my ears on the treble, and I know I'm a treble sensitive person. And to you, I say, I'm sorry, but that's the honest truth. I haven't yet found something that does what the Variations does better, like the Timeless, without that fatigue that the Timeless has. It's really just, it's the only other recommendation I would give, it would be the Ikko OH10. The Ikko OH10 has a strong bass presence with great mid-range clarity and no sibilance from treble. So it's in a way better than the Timeless in that respect because it lacks that treble fatigue. But the OH10 has a different presentation of the bass. It's just different. The Timeless and the Variations have this broader shelf in the low end, it sounds like, or bigger sub bass or something that gives it that fuzz, that kind of lush sound. Whereas the Obsidian or OH10 from Ikko has a punchy sound in its low end, whether that's the low mids or upper bass that's doing that, and a reduction maybe in the sub bass. I can't be totally sure. I don't look at the graphs. I just go by my ears, but that's what it sounds like. So if you're looking for a good low-end presence with a good mid-focused clarity in most of the instruments with nothing sounding recessed, I would totally go for the Obsidian or the Timeless. But the Variations are just not for me totally. I would still give them like an A- rank, something that still shows that they are better than a lot of stuff I'd rank at B range. Like my highest B-rated earphone would be the Tin Hi-Fi T3 Plus. It has a great balance, no fatigue anywhere, and enough bass presence to satisfy, even though it's not a hefty bass presence compared to these guys. But it's such a great balance. But the problem is the fidelity, how clearly you're hearing or engaged you might feel with everything is just not quite as splashy or as interesting as this other stuff that I knock into the A ranks for my tastes. The Variations does break into the A ranks, but it's like an A- for me. It would be down there with the other things that are strong, but with caveats as like the Zens Up or the Prism from Taunch Gym. Although I think I'm gonna bump up the Zens Up to a straight A because it is so technically impressive that, well, anyway, this is not a Zens Up video. In any case, guys, thank you for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, and tune in for a review video if I have one for these. If they don't show up in a review video, they'll show up in a comparison video of some kind. You'll hear the audio samples somewhere in the future. Please consider subscribing or supporting me on Patreon, and I'll see you on the next one.